Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're coming from, Cowboys Nation, you know the drill. Welcome to the Starboys Double XO show. I'm your host, and with me, my co-host, Mr. Daryl Clark and Mrs. Camber Michelle. What's up, guys?
What it is, fam?
I'm good. Did I get married all of a sudden because now I'm Mrs.?
I did. I messed that up. It's Miss. It's Miss. Wow. And thank you for calling me out. I deserve that.
Dang, that's how you know the camera don't want that. She's like,
Like, oh no, I'm not Mrs.
Mrs.
Nope,
Michelle.
I'm married. No, ma'am. No, sir. No, none.
I feel that energy.
No ring. There's no ring. I ain't doing that. Been there, done that.
You be careful. You need to be careful about announcing that. If I were you, I'd be wearing like a fake ring. You know what I mean?
There you go.
Because then these
watch them DMs. Listen to that phone.
Right now. I just saw it just lit up.
I'm like, I need to see your bank statements, your portfolio.
Right? Yeah.
Need a background check.
All right, so hey, we got a very special guest joining us on the show today. I'm excited. I'm excited about this show. We have a lot of questions from our viewers here that want to ask this special guest many questions. So it's going to be fun. Overall, it's going to be a really good show. A lot of knowledge to be passed around. So, we hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, our special guest with us today, Bryan Broaddus, longtime scout, Super Bowl champion scout, Dallas Cowboys affiliate, and fan favorite. Bryan Broaddus, how are you?
I'm doing well, guys. I've heard a lot about you cats here. I'm kind of excited about being on this show tonight. I know this might be a little bit difficult for an old crusty guy to have to deal with, but I think I'm up to the challenge of dealing with you guys.
You might be. Thank you for joining us, first and foremost. We definitely appreciate it. Okay, so the reason we're all here, of course, is the draft, the 2021 draft, and we have a multitude of questions, and we actually have some fan questions, and that's how we're going to start this off. So we have Kelly K9 says, would you draft Pitts at 10 if he's there? And this is just
I understand talking to I've done a little scouting about this show, and I understand there's some Pitts haters here, right? You have a couple of Pitts haters.
I wouldn't call it that. No, I wouldn't call it that. I don't hate Pitts. I love him. He's unbelievably talented.
Just wouldn't do it at 10, right? You just wouldn't do it at 10?
I know I have it's hard. It's a hard choice for me. That's a really hard decision, but I lean 13. That's where I land. We'll get to that. But how do you feel?
Oh, I was just curious what you guys feel too. I could learn a lot by my panel here is what I can do. So yeah, I'll tell you what though, me personally, I put out my top 51 today. Kyle Pitts is my second rated player on my top 51. And I don't look at Kyle Pitts as a tight end. I look at it as a weapon. I look at him as it's in all my years, my 30 years of doing this, you look for those players and that can change a game with the way they play. And I've watched this kid play. I was watching, and we're talking about all these corners that we're going to get into. I'm sure we're going to get into Surtain. I'm sure we're going to get into Horn. I'm sure we're going to get into Joseph. All these SEC corners that are trying to cover this guy, because that's what they do. The best chance these defensive coordinators have in the SEC is put their best players on this type of guy.
Right.
And what I've learned about watching Kyle Pitts play is that with his body type, his length, and when I talk about length, I talk about reach, because if you look at Kyle Pitts the last couple of years, high 80s, right around 90% target to reception rate. And the reason why is because when this guy extends his hands, his reach is so much longer. So what happens is you have to go through him to get to the ball. And if you go through him or get through him, now you're trying to get to the ball. Well, he's also got his hands extended. You're hitting him on the forearms and the wrists. Right. He's not going to allow you to get to the ball. So every contested ball you try to make with this guy, he's going to be able to extend and make the play. And I kind of feel like, to me, when you watch him play, I don't – there's been guys in this league that have been just outstanding at just catching the football. But there's so many different things that you can do with him. I mean, you can line him up wide. You could line up in the slot. You could put him as a wing. You could put him in line. He makes the Cowboys – and I know just from a Cowboys perspective, their problems in the red zone. And will Kellen Moore use him the right way? Will Kellen Moore steal some ideas from Dan Mullen and how they use things in Florida? And Kyle Trask was a Heisman Trophy candidate, a finalist, because of guys like him and Tony and people like that. Right. So to me, if it's an offensive player like that, yes. Now, I love Chase. I also love Smith at Alabama. I love Waddle. But Pitts is the only one that if he got to me at 10 of those offensive players, that I would make that pick. I think he's rare in every sense of the word right there as a football player.
Okay. All right.
How long you say you were doing this again, Brian? No, I'm just
So, D, how you feeling about that?
Yeah,
you want to continue our discussion anymore?
Brian, I am going to own up to it. I'm going to own up to it on this panel. I have been the naysayer, but it's not because of his generational talent. So let me ask you this. Here's a follow-up question then, Brian. So you would take him at 10?
I would.
Even though we have this lack of talent and draft and free agent capital on the defensive side, okay. Well, you've answered that.
I'll tell you why, because I've learned enough about this draft that I know that it's not a one-player draft. And in my heart, I believe, in my eyes, and again, this is my board. If you're out there and you don't want Pitts and you think this is a bad defense, I don't have a gripe for you. You're right. This defense was historically bad, but again, I'm thinking about. I know in the second round, I've got like 5 cornerbacks sitting there. I know I've got at least 4 safeties sitting there. I know I have linebackers sitting there. I know I have defensive tackles sitting there. I've got defensive ends sitting there. So to me, I'm not going to make this about one player. I'm going to make it about, okay, how do I go out and maximize my pick at this time? If I go out and get a guy that's the second best player on my board, that's my job, And me personally, I don't think Pitts gets to them. I don't think but then again, we didn't think CeeDee Lamb was going to get to him, okay? And he was the best wide receiver on my board. So, but I have to be prepared. If something happens in front of me where all of a sudden he's there, I think you have to strongly consider that. And again, because I know that those defensive players, that I have a better chance of getting the type of, and I think I have 19 players in the first round on my board. The majority of them are offensive players. Mm-hmm. Of first round grades are offensive players, not defensive players. No defensive tackles. Ojulari, Phillips at defensive end. What do I think about Zaven Collins from Tulsa? Is he a Sam linebacker? Where would I play him? What am I going to do with Parsons? Am I worried about immaturity there? Surtain, Horn. Wait a minute. I liked Farley. Whoa, what's up with this back thing with Farley? I have more questions about those early guys than I do about what I'm looking at in rounds 2 and 3 on my board when it comes to those defensive players. So okay. I think that's the one player that would get me not to take a defensive player if he was there.
Okay, so Brian, so if you feel that strongly about him, would you trade up to get him, and how much would you give up?
No, you know what? I'm not going to trade up there. I'm not going to trade up there. And even though, and I'll tell you what, it's a fair question, because what's going to happen is I'm going to make sure I'm going to keep myself I'm going to make sure that I'm going to keep myself in position if he falls to me. But I also know that, okay, I could have a possibility to take. Now, the thing that would bother me, maybe trading up would be the right thing to do. I would worry about somebody thinking, I worry about Carolina at 8, and I worry about Denver at 9 selling their pick. If I'm the Cowboys, and I know this for a fact, they are worried about one of those teams bailing out. And all of a sudden, if you're a fan of Surtain, if you like him, everybody in the league knows Dallas is hunting defensive players. Dallas is hunting corners. Everybody knows that. So all of a sudden, someone says, well, boom, I'm going to jump in front of Dallas. Because with Farley now being with the back, and by the way, I heard from medical people that rehab will help, but long-term is not going to be good. So that takes Farley, I think, out of the mix. If he was in the mix, I'd say, okay, let's sit there and ride this and see what happens. But like I said, I wouldn't trade up for Pitts. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to take – now, I will say this. I'm interested in taking 44 and 75 and trying to work this thing back into the 20s. Now, the problem is there, will somebody let me in? I don't know if somebody will let me in. That's the problem I'm looking at right now. Because, or do I move back? Do I move back from 10? Everybody talks about New England. I don't think New England would give you a first-round pick for the five-place move, okay? And, again, I'm trying to get to your point about I wouldn't trade up, but I'm thinking about staying, but will I go back? I'm kind of debating that, but I don't really want to because I'm thinking behind me, Giants could take receiver, Philadelphia takes receiver, and now you have all these teams that have cornerback as their second need, and I don't know if they're really shot in the rear over Newsome right now. I'm not getting that vibe that they really, really like Newsome. So it might force you to have to sit there and pick a player. But if you go to New England at 15, I'd hold them up for 46. So that would give you 15, 44, 46. You can do some damage, but you got to know why you're going back, and you got to know who you're going back for, Yep. And again, offensive players, there's people in that building that will tell you, hey, we should draft an offensive tackle at 10 if we can get one, and that just tells you what they think about Tyron Smith's health. That's the problem. That's the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about. You can talk about defense all you want, but what about your left tackle?
They restructured him, Brian. He's here. They restructured that contract, man.
Oh no, but that's what I'm saying. That's but hey, these guys will eat money. They'll eat money, but that's the problem. That's the problem that you run into is when you talk to people in the building, they'll say, hey, what do you think about Slater from Northwestern? What do you think about Darashall from Virginia Tech? I've had people tell me they think Slater from Northwestern is the next Zach Martin at guard. Mm-hmm. Not so sure what kind of tackle he could be.
I agree.
From USC. The two top guards are Slater, Vera Tucker, and then the two tackles. So I probably didn't answer your question. I wouldn't trade up for the player. I think I'm going to sit there and let this thing ride. And if he gets to me, great. If he doesn't get to me, I'm fine with it. I will take your defensive player then if he's there.
Oh, okay. And this actually brings my next question. Who is your defensive player if he's there? I got a feeling I know who it is, but I just want to hear from you.
I love Horn. Oh. Yeah, I do. I love Horn. And I'll tell you why I love Horn. Horn to me, though, is when you look at how he plays, I think in the NFL you have to play with a chip, especially on the outside, a chip on that shoulder. I'm not saying that Surtain doesn't. Surtain is one of the safest, most steady players you can draft it. That would be, and there's no problem with him. There's no problem. I mean, hey, good player, played in huge games. The thing you worry about Alabama kids are they at the level that they're at? Their ceiling, are they there playing in Alabama at that ceiling already? Are you going to get any more out of them? Right. And so that's the question you have to ask yourself, but you're going to get a steady football player. You're going to get one that got coached really hard. You're going to get one that played in a lot of games. You're going to get it a guy. I mean, I scouted his dad. His dad was a bad MFer too. You know what I'm saying? So I draft a dad. If you let me draft a dad, I draft a dad after what I know. But I like Horn. I just do. I think there's something about that edginess that he has. We talk about the length. We talk about how fiery he is. I think football is really important to him. So that's the kind of guy. Now he'll hold, he'll grab, he'll clutch,
keep saying that.
All kinds of stuff. But you know what? I mean, to me, give me the guy that's going to battle his ass off every single rep, and that's what that kid does. And he's a good football player. But if they took Surtain, I wouldn't be disappointed at all either.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I've been debating this. Me and Daryl did some all-22 film review on him, and his 2019 tape wasn't great to me, right? And he improved much more in 2020, but it was the grabbing was a little bit of a concern. But the way that Alabama that he played that game, and he actually did okay, but he kind of got tore up by Devonta Smith. And it was hard for me to look away from that. He was very grabby, but at the same time, and I moved on from him mentally at 10, right? I'm like, it feels too rich for me. He seems like he's got a high ceiling, but I don't. It's one of those a little bit more risky than Surtain, obviously for me. Yeah. But the concern for me is just, is he going to continue to hold at that next level?
Can I ask you a question? What do you like about Surtain?
So I actually like him in press. Okay. I like that stiff jab. He brings it often. He's got a really stiff jab, and he kind of redirects. So I know his hips are a little tight, it seems like to me. But he transitions pretty smoothly for the most part. And I feel like he's just this big, lean corner. And most of the film that I watched of him, it just seemed like he was – some of it was quite boring, honestly. He was just traveling. He was just traveling at the guy at his hip. The problem that I noticed about him was he gave up a lot of inside routes, like slant routes and stuff, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it's kind of hard because Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, their defense is, I think it's cover 2, but it's also it's man within like a certain area within their coverage, right? Within their cover 2 zone. So I saw a lot of great things. He was just solid, fundamentally sound. I just felt like everything was there as far as, and typical coach by Nick Saban, right? So he just seemed like he had it all the fundamentals down, and I love that about his game. It's very safe.
So he scares you less than Horn. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah. Just Horn just seems, it's the grabbiness with Horn is pretty scary to me, honestly. And I'm the thing is, when I watched highlights of Horn today, and I got excited because I put together a little clip, and I was like, man, he's exciting, right? Because he's got this energy and this boastfulness and this, Jalen Ramsey type vibe to him, and I like that. I like that dog, but to me, it just seems like he reaches too much, and I feel like at the NFL level, it's going to get him in trouble. Is that something?
Cameron, where are you in this one?
I keep going back and forth. Honestly, I like Horn as the player. I think Surtain is the safe. I think he's the safe pick. Honestly, I think he'll fit right in. He fits the needs and everything. But I do like that part about Horn. I guess I do have a concern with the way the refs have been calling PIs constantly, especially as bad as it has in the last 2 years, that I don't know if they're going to, he's going to be constantly, being called for it. Is that coachable? I mean, is that something that can be fixed? I'm not going to be disappointed with either player, to tell you the truth. I think either one of them is going to be a solid pick. So
I like what you guys are saying. I think that in war rooms across the country, I think that there's going to be some split, but I think that the majority of them will have the safer player, like you guys are talking about.
Right.
I do know some teams that have Horn on top of Surtain, but there were a lot of teams that liked Farley too until all this back stuff came down, and he was. And then a lot of teams, he was on the board as being the best corner. So I think that, it's almost like the argument you have with quarterbacks that, okay, we always compare it to ice cream. Your chocolate chip is my rocky road, kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, it depends on what you like in the player, and can you coach the grabbiness out of this kid? Yeah, maybe so. I'll tell you this though, I like the fact of how aggressive he is. That's the one thing that kind of sells me on the player. And if I have to take a corner, give me one that's going to battle and not let people inside on him on those routes and stuff like that. If you show me a cornerback that plays inside routes and can defend those, then I'll draft you. But if you're a guy that's constantly giving up stuff inside, and not that Surtain is giving up a bunch inside, but you do see it, just like you see Horn grabbing people too. So It's kind of a, depending on what flavor of ice cream you like.
Pick your poison. Right. And I mean, and that's, just Horn. Again, I've been on the fence about him so much, just at 10, but I do believe
don't get on the fence.
He's a talented player. He's talented.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. You don't. This is where you get in trouble in draft rooms. Right now, you would get killed for what you just said.
Okay. I don't like Horn at 10.
Nobody's going to blame you. Seriously, nobody's going to blame you if you say I'm going to take Surtain and I'm going to live with it. Nobody's going to blame you. It's when you ride that fence. Because I was with Mike Zimmer up in Minnesota. Mike was with us, and Mike kept going back and forth on players. I said, Mike, you're killing the scouts. You're killing them. You riding the fence gives them no direction. You're killing the scouts. And he's like, what do you mean? I go, you've got to make a decision. You've got to say it one way or another. You got to give the scouts direction. I'm not trying to bust you, Zach. I'm just trying to tell you.
Not.
Yeah, don't ride a fence on a player. That's the last thing. And if you're wrong about it, wear it. If you're right about it, you move on and evaluate somebody else. That's kind of the attitude. I mean, I could be dead balls wrong about Surtain. I like the player. I just like Horn better, But I respect what you guys are saying.
I think that's where I'm at. It's coming out of a place of respect. To me, 10 feels very, very rich for Horn. I think 2020 was a much better season, but it just wasn't. It wasn't enough for me. I saw too many things on the tape that I didn't like, and that scares me. And I wouldn't be comfortable with a premium pick at number 10 with drafting a player that I feel like needs some work. I'm just not comfortable with that. And yes, Surtain is a safer player in my opinion, but again, that's my opinion. And a lot of people are out on this. I mean, they're back and forth too. Yeah. So, but
I totally, like I said, as long as you do the work, and as long as you have an opinion, again, you in a draft room, you get murdered for riding the fence.
Right.
Either wear it or don't wear it. That's how you got to live in a draft state. But you make some good points. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm glad you said that, Brian. Here's this for emphatic. There is no way we were drafting Kyle Pitts at 10. Let's go on to the next one.
Okay, you know what? That actually leads us into our next viewer question. This is from our dear friend LP Cruz, and he says, "Who is the one player you were so damn sure about, but nobody in the room would listen to you?"
Oh, geez. It's funny because we were doing a deal. Well, it was a deal for the quarterback that we got from the Yankees. It was why am I going brain dead all of a sudden? The kid that was the third baseman with the Yankees, and he was with the Houston. We got it from Houston for a third-round pick. Why am I going? I'm going brain dead. Come on, guys, help me. Cowboy fans, help me here.
I'm too.
Don't go brain dead.
Don't talk baseball to me.
Drew Henson. It was Drew Henson.
Oh,
God, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, the quarterback. Yeah.
Drew Henson. I couldn't remember his name. I was thinking of Chad Hutchinson, and then it was Drew Henson all of a sudden. And I'll never forget this because Sean Payton and I were watching the film together, and Sean and I were like, this guy can't play dead. He can't play. I mean, we're watching 9 games of this guy. He can't play. And like everybody in the room's like, oh no, this guy's the next Troy Aikman. This guy, I mean, Parcells, everybody's talking. And Sean and I are like going, this guy can't play. This guy can't play. I'm sorry, he can't. This is when Sean Payton and I became really close, because in that room, everybody was MFing us for our view. But nobody was listening. We kept saying, and bringing up argument and fighting with people. And lo and behold, we went ahead and got the player, and he couldn't play dead. And to this day, Sean and I still laugh about that. That was our shining moment, that we told everybody. But if you sit in that room long enough, you'll have arguments where people. I was talking about earlier with John Gruden. John Gruden, he was trying to sell us on Isaac Bruce, the Rams Hall of Fame receiver. And the scouts didn't like Isaac Bruce. And John's going, you guys don't know what the F you're talking about. This guy's a first-round player. He was going on and on and on and on. And everybody's like going, John, no, you're not right about this. John, you're not right about this. And sure enough, like years later, I still see John Gruden this day. I say, hey, what do you think about Isaac Bruce? He goes, yeah, all you MFers. Yeah. You didn't like that guy, did you? Yeah. I showed you, and those are the kinds of things. But if you sit in that room long enough, you'll have a few of those. Man, I can't even remember all of them, but trust me, there are plenty where you're just like, you're losing your mind of things that are happening like that.
I can't imagine.
So Bryan, look, I'm going to follow up because you mentioned the quarterback and Sean Payton. What about Tony Romo, man? What did you guys, because it was Sean Payton, right, that convinced him to come
actually, it was
Tony. Yeah,
it was really good. This is when the draft process really works, because it started off that Jason Garrett's dad, Jim Garrett, did the report. Jim Garrett put him in the 5th round. Fine grade. Western Illinois, hey, evaluate him, 5th round grade. Boom, evaluate. Good job, Jim. Jim Hess was the cross-checker for the quarterbacks. He gave Tony a 5th round grade as well, kind of kept him right there. Chris Hall, who's still with the organization as the coordinator of college scouting, the scouts used to be allowed to move the tags. Like they're like, move that guy down, move this guy up, move guys around, kind of like the final board thing. Chris wouldn't let any scout move Tony's tag. Tony's tag stayed right there in that 5th round. So all of a sudden, it's like Sean Payton comes in. Sean's like, well, you guys got him a little too low, need to raise him up. But Sean did a great job of when we were in a position where we could never grab Tony with a pick. But Sean got on the phone with him in the last day and just held his hand the whole way. I mean, the whole way. And I remember Sean kept coming in and talking to Coach Parcells and Jerry about him. He's like, hey, we're going to lose this kid. We're going to lose this kid. You guys got to make a pick. We never could get to him. And lo and behold, Sean recruiting the kid the whole last day of the draft. And then we got Jerry on the phone. Jerry hammered him with good Jerry salesmanship stuff. Jerry got it done, gave him some money, and we beat Mike Shanahan and the Denver Broncos for. But what people don't realize about Tony Romo's career was he was almost released. If Quincy Carter doesn't fail the drug test, Tony's going to get cut.
Wow.
We had 4 quarterbacks. And I'll never forget being in Oxnard, California. I was with Larry Lacewell, and I walked into the meeting room after I went jogging, came in, and Lace goes, we're cutting Quincy Carter. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, we're cutting Quincy Carter. I said, what for? He goes, drugs. We're cutting him for the drugs. He's the drug tests and all that. If Quincy Carter was still on that team, Drew Henson, it was Drew Henson, it was Vinny Testaverde, and then Quincy Carter were going to be the quarterback.
Oh no.
Tony Romo was a failed drug test away from being off the Dallas Cowboys. That's how close his career was.
All this hatred towards Quincy Carter. Y'all need to respect that, man.
Right?
All right, hey, I'm gonna keep it going. I'm gonna move in with the next viewer question, Bryan. So our guy Steve from Lexington, he wants to know what you would do or how much you would give up to move back into the first to get Mr. Barrymore.
Yeah, I think what you're going to probably have to do is, we talked about 44 and 75. That gets you, boy, that's going to put you right in that area of like 23, 24. We'll see. I mean, I don't know if somebody will let you back in. You could sure. Now, I'll tell you what's different. It used to be with the fifth-year options that teams wouldn't let you do it because everybody wanted that fifth-year option. Well, now that the fifth-year option is guaranteed, there's a lot of teams. The Cowboys are going to have to make a decision here coming up on Leighton Vander Esch, whether they want to give him the fifth-year option. So teams used to be like, oh, no, we're not going to let you back in. But can you entice somebody? Somebody might see the board like I do where 44 and 75 plus your own second-round pick might be better value than picking a guy at 23 or 24. So that could be your hope right there. But yeah, you're going to probably have to go with 44 and 75. You might be able to dangle Michael Gallup in with one of the picks. You dangle Gallup with it for a team that might make it worthwhile to somebody. But that's kind of what you're going to have to do.
Would you give up those 2 picks to come back to get Barmore, or do you feel that Levi and some of them that are in the late first, second?
Yeah, we knew that
Husky.
Husky was going to get mentioned.
You knew I was going to throw in one of my.
You knew that. I tell you, I like your Husky Joe Tryon a lot too. I like him as a defensive end. I think with Barmore, that's kind of where he's going to be taken. I personally don't have a first-round grade on him. And like I said, I have 19 first-round grades, and he's in that 22 to 23 range for me right now. But he is my number one technique. I think if they come back in, it might be if they go, say they were to go offense. And I don't mean offense like Pitts. I mean offense like if one of those tackles was at 10 and they come back in to try and grab one of those corners, that might be where they go. But I don't know if they would come back in for Barmore. But people have talked about it. I haven't floated that idea to anybody, but to me, that would be kind of one of those ones that I would say, maybe you come back in, you double dip on the corners. Maybe you strike 2 corners there. But if you do 44, we had Stephen Jones on. Matter of fact, we're having Stephen Jones on again on Friday on 105.3 The Fan. And I'm going to ask him about that because he admitted that they haven't done a very good job with the safety stuff. And I kind of feel like that 44 might be a good spot for a safety. So if you grabbed a corner at, say, 10 and you took a safety at 44, might be a good possibility going on right there.
So you mentioned jumping back up earlier about maybe possibly jumping back up into the first round. Who are you targeting personally if you're thinking about trading back up in the first round?
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. I think a lot of it has to do with what you're looking at. What did you pick at 10? And is there a player that's still sitting there on that board that, okay, you grabbed a player at 10 that's obviously in that wheelhouse of you on average, there are 18 to say 21 first-round grades. Maybe you took a player, say you have Surtain. You take Surtain, and he's your 4th best player on your board, okay? And then all of a sudden, they've got a grade for one of these defensive ends or maybe a linebacker. Maybe they still have a first-round grade. That's the only opportunity that you would dive back in there for if you felt like, okay, let's get our 4th best player and let's get our 12th best player. That's the only way that you would dive back into this thing. And, like I said, a lot of it depends on what you do at, maybe you like one of these offensive tackles, maybe if you want to dive back in, you just think the value is too good, for one of these second-round tackles. They might have them as a grade as, Jenkins from Oklahoma State, Leatherwood from Alabama, those kinds of guys. Do you like one of these defensive ends? I'll tell you something that got me nervous the other day, guys, was when Daniel Jeremiah when he mocked Kwity Paye to Dallas at 10.
Mm-hmm.
I had not seen that from anybody else. You know, that's one of those things where you're watching it and you go, "Oh, is he talking to somebody?" Because everybody else either has it tackle, tackle, corner, tackle, corner. It used to be Parsons was in there too. Parsons, tackle, corner, Parsons, tackle, corner. And then all of a sudden, Kwity Paye gets mocked at 10, and you're going, whoa, what just happened here?
What do you know?
What are you talking to? So maybe one of those defensive ends that we probably don't want. I don't know how you guys feel about Rousseau. I don't know what you think about Owe. I don't know what you think about Kwity Paye. Those might be a guy that they if they do jump back in, that they jump back in for one of those guys.
To me, it's going to be hard not to address the cornerback position within the first or second round. Just considering what we have currently on this roster. I mean, because I sit here and I think about, like, what are you going to do? You're going to put Anthony Brown out there, right? And we don't really have, unless we restructure somebody's contract, we're not really making, it doesn't seem like at this point in time, any moves on any other free agents. So I feel like that's just a need. And I just hate that. I feel like other teams know that and they can see it, right? And I think there's going to be a good little list of those cornerbacks going before 44, right? So,
yeah, that's the thing about it is once those cornerbacks start going off the board, they're going to go quick. And there's some guys that are some guys that are shorter guys. You look at Samuel from Florida State, Molden from Washington. They're good players. Joseph, where is he going to go from Kentucky? There's a really good group of players right there in that second round pocket. Like I said, I was trying to argue with you or just discuss with you about why I would take Pitts, because I'm not making this a one-player draft. I'm thinking about, okay, I'll hammer a defensive player at 44. I'll hammer another one at 75. I'll hammer another one at 99. I'm just going to keep working on this thing, but I know in my heart that, hey, I got the best player on my board, and now I'm going to try and take care of the rest of these things, because I believe this draft is really going to stretch in the middle of it. That day two, I think there's going to be some really, really good value, fun picks that teams are going to make during that second day.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that logic, Brian. I'm asking myself, what's the disparity between the top two rated corners in Horn and Surtain and the third and fourth, right? Yeah. What is that disparity?
There's clearly a reason why that Surtain and Horn and Farley are in the first round. But I do feel like though that when there's always going to be some deficiencies. I mentioned, and Camber will tell you about, and you guys will tell me about the Washington kids, the Husky kids. When you watch Molden play, I scouted his dad, Alex, when he was 1996, when he was at University of Oregon, and I see I'm like, his old man was a hell of a player. It's a 12th overall pick by the Saints. And, you see what Molden has done at Washington. He plays the slot. He can play safety. He can play corner. If my old boss, Ron Wolf, used to say this, though, if you're a shorter guy, you better walk on water. And those guys like Molden and Samuel and those guys, they kind of walk on water a little bit. They don't back down from challenges and stuff. So there's always going to be some deficiency at that second round. Joseph, from Kentucky, there's always going to be something that people are going to go, oh, well, that's what's wrong with him. But it shouldn't deter you from saying, oh, well, there's this massive drop from the top corners to the second round corners. It doesn't work that way. Scheme fits work out for a lot of guys. Coaches work out for a lot of guys. I've seen a lot of second and third round corners. The best one ever I've seen, Richard Sherman, was a 5th round pick. And you look at what he does. He goes out, he's smart, he's tough. He knows how to play, knows how to stay in position. You could find them at all levels. It depends on what team and what scheme you get these guys into.
Brian, would you agree? Like Camber and I, we're all on the Husky guys, right? And we love Molden. When I watch him, I think Buda Baker. I mean, that kid plays downhill, and he just comes for your you-know-what. Dude, what do you think about that? Would you compare him to a Buda Baker?
Yeah, I think that to me that, and to me, Buda was a guy that, you're right. He was a missile the way he played. And, with Molden, I love the way I love how aggressive he is. I love, to me, give me a guy that can play a lot of different positions, but play them well. I don't need a guy that, okay, let me give you a guy. I love Koromora from Notre Dame, the linebacker. Love Wuso Koromora. I love him, But then I think about, there was a kid last year named Simmons that was at Clemson that Arizona picked. And all of a sudden he's playing at Clemson. You're watching him play linebacker. You're watching him play safety. You're watching him play in the slot. And you're like, what is he? And Arizona really never figured out where to play him. But some kids do get it. I think Molden is one of those kids that when you say, okay, you go cover in the slot. Okay, you go play safety this time. Okay, you go work on the outside in the dime package. I think that's the type of kid that, you watch him play. It doesn't look too big for him. It doesn't look like that he is, stressing out having to play a lot of different spots. And that's the best thing you can say when you're talking about a guy that plays a lot of spots. If his game looks deficient because he's having to do that, then it's not worth taking the player. But I do love the Molden kid. Like I said, all those Washington kids, I'm not just saying it because I'm on your broadcast here today. Those are good kids. Those are good players. I mean, they do a great job up there getting players and evaluating them, and those kids come out and play in the league and play well.
Yeah. So, Cam, do you want to go ahead? Do you have a question?
Actually, I don't have a question from a viewer, but I kind of wanted to talk to you about the interior portion of our defensive line and this draft, and what do you think we need to do to fix it, and who would you fix it with?
Yeah, I think that, to me, they'll tell you that they like Tristan Hill, that he was coming along well. They'll tell you that they like, that Neville Gallimore was making some progress. They'll tell you all those things, that under tackle, that 3 technique. Okay, I'm willing. I saw some improvement. I saw some things with Tristan Hill that gave me some hope. I think that, to me, you could draft a defensive tackle. We talk about the Washington kid being a possibility. But to me, I would start with trying to get a 1 technique. I would try and get a nose tackle. I would try and get a 318 to 320 pound 1 technique. And the one thing that this draft actually affords me is that I think there's a couple of those kids that you can look at. I really like the McNeil kid from North Carolina State. I think that if you watch him play, here's a big man that and when you watch him play at North Carolina State, he is right up on the center's face. I mean, he is breathing the same air as that center is. He's that close. But you watch him play, you watch him get rid of centers and get rid of guards and get down the line and get in the backfield and get outside the tackle box. I think those are the kinds of things, when you see that, you're like going, oh, man, that's what you need. That's what you need. Another kid, I talk about, there's Marvin Wilson from Florida State. What's funny about Marvin Wilson, he wears number 21. It's a kind of a weird thing to see a big old body guy with that stretched out number 21. But that's what he wears. But there's another guy, and you watch him, and he plays on the offensive side of the line of scrimmage. And he's another guy that's like powerful, get rid of guys, and has some pass rush moves and affects the pocket. And I think if you watched his tape from like 2 years ago, he was like a guy that probably would have been a first-round player. And then he got hurt, and then they had coaching changes. And, I mean, a lot of things kind of swirling around with this guy. But I love him. There's another kid, Tonga, Chris Tonga from BYU. A 326-pound guy, getting rid of people and all that. Rod Marinelli, I think, limited them of really getting a 1 technique that can help them. He was always about coaching the orphans, and nobody wants these guys. But then I remind him, I'm like, Coach, you did have Booger McFarland as a first-round 1 technique, and you had Warren Sapp as a first-round 3 technique. And by the way, you had Derek Brooks at linebacker. So, if you have good players, you're going to have a good scheme. And I think with the Cowboys, they need to, and I think Dan Quinn, again, I've worked with guys that worked with Dan Quinn, that know Dan Quinn, and they talk about Dan Quinn in a way of, and Dan Quinn went to all these pro days. I mean, he was out in the Pacific Northwest looking at guys. He was, on the East Coast. He was down south. I mean, he's trying to find these players. So hopefully his influence, and trust me, coach's influence in the Cowboys war room is real. It is real. And so, hopefully he has a better eye than what happened with Rod Marinelli and some of the decisions they made. And hopefully they can get him a big time one technique, and then let the development see if Tristan Hill and Neville Gallimore, and see if that can actually work.
Cool. All right. Another question from one of our viewers. Our main man, Marcus from Memphis. So I hear you're an LSU guy, Bryan, right?
That's true.
Big time LSU guy, right? So he wants to know about some of your pet cats from LSU, and specifically he wanted me to ask you about, and I've never heard this name, and he swears you will, Racey McMath.
Racey McMath, yeah. I tell you what, kind of really of a down the line guy with the Tigers. The thing with LSU, and they went from a national championship team 2 years ago to a team that was really fortunate to be 5-5. And a lot of those kids, they just didn't have. I mean, like Chase opted out. Marshall opted out. I mean, it was a real struggle. And defensively, they were really, really bad. McMath, he's a good player. I mean, he was a good college player, but he was a good college player with others around him that could kind of carry his game. And so, yeah, I mean, Jabril Cox is another one who's a linebacker, that people are talking about. And I'm thinking, like, the one thing Jabril Cox could do, and McMath, those guys, is they have the athletic ability to stay with guys. But how tough are you to tackle? How good are you to finish? Those are the things when you look at LSU, the difference between being a national championship team and being a team that was 5-5 was a lot of things happen, offensively with no quarterback. But then on defensively, though, they just could not make enough plays. And I think that's the thing that worries, a lot of scouts. It's like, wow, how can you go from being this and then all of a sudden being this? And those kids are a part of that. And, the LSU kids, when they've got drafted on defense, have done a pretty good job. Just so happens that Dallas got one in Mo Claiborne. And, it's funny about Mo Claiborne. Mo never was hurt at LSU. And then he got to the Cowboys, and then he was always hurt. And then sometimes it happens that way. But yeah, it's those LSU kids, you got to keep an eye on them. But there's some parts to their game right now that bother me a little bit with the lack of some finish, especially on defense.
Okay, so I have a question here from one of the viewers. Brew Skadoo, apparently is his name.
Does nobody not use their name on Twitter anymore? Is that kind of a thing?
Not. So he said, could you see a scenario where Slater is the pick at 10 and the Cowboys actually do decide to trade back into the first for either Farley or Newsome?
Yeah, we talked about Newsome. They believe that Newsome has got long-term, could be. Now, I'll say this about when doctors tell you about long-term injuries and stuff like that. 2 cases I was a part of. In Green Bay, our doctors failed Larry Allen. He played for a million years and had a Hall of Fame career. In Philadelphia, I drafted Jeremiah Trotter from Stephen F. Austin in the 3rd round. Had a doctor tell me about his knee. I don't know if he could play 10 games or 10 years. He played like 13 years. So,
right.
You got to be careful about it, but you got to trust doctors. I mean, I don't have DR period in front of my name. Those guys have DR period in front of their name for a reason. So going back in, I don't know if they would do it for Farley. And the thing with Newsome, I don't think these guys are bluffing me or smoke screening me on this. I'm just not sure about their real love for Newsome. So kind of keep that in mind if you're talking about trading back into the round.
And were you around, Bryan, another guy? Remember this guy, Ron Leary, about his knee?
I was.
Right?
I was. And I'll tell you what's impressive about Ron Leary is bone on his knee. degenerate knee and all that stuff. The one thing that I always respected about Ron Leary, when he played football at Memphis, they were a horrible team. Memphis has got a good football team now. Last 5 years, they've been good. When Ron Leary was there, they were bad. If you watch a player that plays on a bad football team but is always playing hard and is the best player on the team despite being down by 30 points all the time, draft that guy. Because that's a guy that's got a lot of pride. And that's where Jerry was so excited. They got Ron Leary like post-draft. They didn't even draft him. They signed him as a free agent. But Ron Leary should have been drafted, but he was a guy that was playing harder than anybody else, being down 35 points in a game. And I've always respected him for that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I've got another one from one of our listeners from New Jersey Cowboy fan.
Here we go.
That's a little irony there. So who's your hidden gem in this draft?
Man, I'll tell you what, I'm a big fan of this kid, this Oregon safety that
Holland.
Yeah. And people are giving me a lot of grief about him and all that, but I think if you're the Cowboys, I'm trying to find a true free safety. And yeah, this kid opted out, because of the COVID stuff, and that's tough. But like I said, this guy's a true free safety, and every way he plays, I mean, this guy's a ball hawk. I mean, when you watch him play, he knows how to position himself in a way to get the ball. And I think, you got to have a guy that plays with his eyes, that can read routes and stuff like that. I would love the Cowboys to draft a guy like that, because I know if you pair him with Donovan Wilson, you could let Donovan Wilson play downhill all night, and this kid on the back end will cover up and make sure that that nothing gets too deep, or he'll undercut a route, make sure he gets a play. But I mean, he's good when they throw screens and stuff. He knows how to avoid blocks. He gets up in there and to make the play. I really fell in love with him. I know a lot of people like different widers or different safeties or different players, but this guy right here was one of my favorite when I got to study him on tape.
Compare him to Morick from TCU. What's the disparity there? You like them the same? One's better?
Yeah, I've got Grant, Holland, and then Morick as my three guys, but I don't have a first round safety is what I don't have. And to me, the three guys that you named are all true free safety type players. And so I know that I work with a guy, Jeff Kavanaugh, who absolutely loves Washington, the shorter other safety at TCU. Yeah. I've talked to some NFL scouts. They think he's going to have to play corner than safety. So kind of keep an eye on that. But with Mooring, you get a guy that's like, you could put this guy in coverage and you don't have to worry about him, because he does a really good job from, when you watch him and how we talk about the eyes. And that's the most important thing with safeties. I can tell when safeties don't see the field or don't see development, because their reactions come from what they see. And a lot of teams have gotten pretty good of trying to bait safeties and hold them in position with routes, crossing routes, so they can get routes over the top. And a lot of the really good ones have that ability to see it and understand, okay, that's the decoy. They're throwing the ball deep. But this guy with Mooring, he'll throw his body around too. At 6'1", like he's 207 pounds is what he's at. And so, he's got some decent size to him. He's got the range. He's got the desire, and he's got the ability, the eyes to see the field. So pretty close with all those guys, but I would go with Holland when you start talking about that group.
And as far as Holland goes, so he's mostly played like a nickel cornerback type role, right?
Right.
At Oregon.
Right.
So how hard is it for you to kind of judge these players when they're not quite at that safety position, like adjusting a corner, like say a Byron Jones, right?
Yeah. Yeah. What you have to do is, if you see them have the ability to cover, and then like there's been some games, some cut-ups and stuff where I've seen where he has played where they put him back at safety, and then you see him coming out of the middle of the field, and you see him coming off the hash and stuff like that. So the projection isn't that tough. But if you tell me that this guy, that I can put him down there and he can cover in the slot, he has the size to match up with a tight end, where he has a size to match up with a big receiver and not allow that to escape or anything to happen there. I think that you can make that projection. If you remember Dan Quinn, he took Kazee, the kid that the Cowboys signed. Kazee was a cornerback at San Diego State, and he said, "Nah, I'm going to make him a safety." And so, Dan has a little bit of a track record of being able to take guys and then kind of fit him into where they see a scheme fit. So I'd keep an eye on those kind of corners that then move them to safety for sure.
Yeah. I got actually Zach from Nosebleeds 105.3.
Oh,
Zach
Yeah,
Wolchuk.
yes, sir.
Wooly bully.
Yeah.
He's listening right. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, he said, so what's the secrets with the pork chops?
Okay. This is a bit these guys do on our radio station. So if you're a guest on the show, and they were doing weekends, and now they do nighttime. They're two young guys, really, really, really good at their job.
Yeah,
they follow our show. We're on 2 to 7, and they're on afterwards. And they always ask their guests, they ask them, "How do you like your pork chops? How do you cook pork chops?" So that's kind of like a thing. And some people get like what? What are you talking? But they had me on one night, and this is before I started working in radio. And I told him how I prepare pork chops, like how I make barbecue sauce and how I grill them and they have never had anybody go into detail on how to cook pork chops. So it's kind of a running bit that they have. They have another running bit, and this is going to be kind of maybe, I don't know if it's gross or not, but they always ask guys, like, do you believe when you go to the men's room, do you stand up or sit? That's one of their questions that they ask. And they've asked like players, like J.C. Horn. JC, when you use the men's room, do you stand up or you sit? And the JC's like, well, man, I usually stand up, and so they always try and come up with a little bit of a bit question. But awesome. The pork chop one is like a staple that they ask. Some people don't, but then they get me, who loves to cook, and I told them how to do a pork chop the proper way.
They weren't ready for that.
They're good dudes. Yeah, they're great. They're two young radio guys, and they know their stuff, man. They really, really a lot of fun dealing with those guys. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so do you guys have any questions? Do you have any more or fan viewer questions?
Let me ask you guys some questions. Grill us.
What do you got?
All right, you guys have been doing your shows together, right? Has the Pitts argument been the biggest argument you three have had, or the biggest disagreement that you guys have?
No. Signing Dak.
Yeah. Oh, Dak was a bigger. Okay,
yeah.
now was there pro or con? Who was
pro?
Pro there?
Daryl.
I was con.
Con?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were like, as the Cowboys were like letting it ride, you were okay with that? You were like, hey, they're playing this the right way. They're totally playing it the right way.
He had
there was logic behind it. Look, and so Brian, it was because I just wanted the team to win, and I thought the biggest way to get them to change sort of their approach to free agency was because of the pieces that they already had on offense. That was the big driver for me. I don't think Dak was worth the spin. I think you could have got one of these top-tier, top-rated, college quarterbacks and plugged in with these pieces and then saved that money and then spent in free agency to make the defense better. So that was always my approach. I just got tired of seeing the defense run over, and we've not invested draft capital or free agent to get that defensive talent better. And I thought that was the biggest piece to get them better.
You know what's funny? They have invested draft capital in defense. It just hadn't worked out. They haven't hit on those defensive line. I mean, they've drafted second-round guys, Jalen Smith, Sean Lee. I mean, Leighton Vander Esch. They've drafted guys. They look at Tristan Hill, Neville Gallimore. I mean, how about Taco Charlton? I mean, they've used picks on defensive guys. They just haven't done a good enough job like they have on offense.
Wait, Brian, can I stop you for a second? So would you be saying that we're historically bad
I knew she was going to
at
go there.
drafting defensive players?
I think there's certain positions that Rod Marinelli affected their ability. And I'm not totally, because I tried to defend Will McClay one time on the radio. I got wind that Will wanted TJ Watt, that Will McClay wanted TJ Watt. And so I went on the radio one day and was talking about that. And Will McClay heard me talk about it, and he texts me. He says, call me. And I'm like, okay, what'd I just do? So I called him during break. He says, listen here, don't ever do that again. He goes, I go, Marinelli, we all agreed about TJ Watt. That wasn't just on Rod. That was all of us. We wear that one. That was a group thing. That wasn't just a coach doing that. Now, there's things I think that they've done. They took Zeke because Rod Marinelli and Chris Richard said he'll help us play defense. When they could have taken Ramsey. They could have taken Jalen Ramsey. I mean, Marinelli could have been selfish. Richard could have been selfish and said, hey, let's take Jalen Ramsey and go to battle, you know. But their decision making on how to build their defense has been really suspect. But yeah, I think to me that when you look what they've done with like drafting like CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, you know, I mean, they've drafted some Michael Gallup. You know, they traded a 1 for Amari Cooper. I mean, they've had better success working with offensive people than they have defensive. And my hope, is if I was a Cowboy fan, my hope would be that Dan Quinn can turn things around, not only from a schematic standpoint, but also an evaluation standpoint. You know, you need coaches that can evaluate. Not all of them can. But if you, and I'm not blaming everything on Rod Marinelli, it sounds like I am, but they leaned on him for a lot of stuff.
Right.
And it didn't, well, look what they did. They get rid of Byron Jones. I mean, they're playing Byron Jones at safety, and Chris Richard walks in and goes, move corner. He's a better corner. Oh, okay. You know, so I think there's some things of not being able to get out of their own way defensively that's really, really, really hurt this team. Some teams have done a great job. Tampa's done a great job drafting defensive players. You know, it just takes the kind of run that they've had on offense. And I'm not making excuses for Will McClay because I bust their ass every chance I get when they don't do a good job. But I also give them credit for trading for Robert Quinn. You know, I'll give them some credit for going and getting an 11.5 sack guy.
Right.
But I think there's that. This is such an unusual organization when it comes to the triangle. Jerry at top, Will in the middle, scouts on one point, coaches on the other. And Will has to try and keep everybody happy in the little triangle. It's a hard job. Instead of like somebody coming in there and saying, hey, the scouts scout, the coaches coach. Let's go. Let's go do this. You know, third down, right. Coaches, you handle that. Scouts, you handle that. There's organizations that are like that. There are organizations that do that. But you have this triangle in Dallas, and the guy in the middle of the triangle is struggling keeping everybody happy. And it's led to some questionable picks, in my opinion, or some things in free agency.
Yeah. So talent evaluation has been a big concern. I mean, especially last year with what we did in free agency, it was bad.
They'll admit it. I talked to Alex Loomis, who's the pro personnel guy. I saw him at a restaurant, he said, "Hey, man, you're kicking my ass pretty good about what we did last year." And I'm like, "Well, yeah. I mean, what do you think?" And he goes, "No, you're right." He goes, but Alex, I also gave you credit for going to get Robert Quinn. You went out and got Robert Quinn and did a really good job. I mean, that's what you got to do. Right. Sometimes you have at pro departments have a good run because they evaluate. If you try not to be too cheap, and that's what the Cowboys tend to do, they get a little too cheap. They're really big on drafting and signing their own. That's the important thing to them. Draft, sign them back. Draft, sign them back.
You can make sure to find us at the Starboys XXO show. So make sure you tune in. We got plenty of great content coming to you guys in the very near future. So make sure to definitely tune in. Follow us on Twitter. Like and subscribe down below. I missed it. Do it one more time. Go ahead.
Let me see your Tootsie Roll.
This is going on YouTube. If anybody makes it to the end of the show, like it's gonna be
Right.
that's beautiful right there. And we can literally end it. I will end it literally with just you. Jelly roll.
So what did you learn tonight? The body roll has to be 3 parts shoulder, 2 parts chest, and you...
Oh no!
It's a slow motion.